Some of the parts you encounter on 90s Mitsubishis, like these fiberglass bumpers, can be downright hateful. Even when you wear gloves, somehow these manage to still jump out and bite you somewhere, and you're going to feel it for days. Add to that, they've got the rustiest parts on my entire car bolted to them, and those are what I'm after here. Let's eat the worst first. I'm trying a new penetrating oil, and I think this one works best as a long-soaking treatment from what I've read in reviews. It doesn't penetrate as deep or as fast as Kroil, but it claims to eat rust if you let it sit. These brackets are coming off so that I can blast them smooth and clean again. I'm pretty sure they'll clean up okay. I'll also be preparing another load for detective coating because there's a few more parts that I've run across, and yet another load of parts to get powder coated. And all of these bumper mounts are part of it. If I just blast these or paint them, they're still going to just rust right back to the same sorry state that you see them in right now. They've made it for 28 years, which is likely way past their intended lifespan, but they're not making any more of these, and I certainly won't feel like doing this again 28 years from now if I just paint them. So I'd rather preserve what I've got. I've got to do that so my bumpers don't fall off. And then there's parts like this. The gas tank, no beef here at all, it's plastic. It's in spectacular shape. It was just dirty and now it's not. Mint condition again in seconds, just getting it wet. It's not metal, I'm totally cool with that. I'll still probably do some other ridiculous thing to it that nobody else ever bothers to do before it's all over. But for now I just want to be able to work on a clean thing. You guys always expect me to clean something after all. The front bumper mounts are in amazing shape compared to the rear ones. They've never been touched before because I've always taken all of this apart the wrong way instead. Always done it the hardest way possible. Today I know better, but I still do it wrong. I've moved my car's horns to different locations because the things they were originally mounted on kind of got deleted. Repurposed anyway. Some cars have one horn and they always sound cheap. Luxury cars and most every American truck built after the 80s typically start with two horns to give them more presence. But the second generation Eclipse actually has 3 horns, and we all know what that means. The third horn's mounted on the passenger side firewall, just like the brake master, the clutch master, hydraulic reservoirs, and lots of other stuff that I'm about to take loose. I have no other reason for saving these for last except that they're hard to get to, they're tucked well out of my way, and they ain't hurting nobody.
Calm down, Skeeter, they ain't hurting nobody.
Getting the hydraulic lines off the clutch master cylinder is the hardest thing to do here overall. You generally have to use the wrench flipping method to advance it when it's giving you grief. You can wiggle the line and turn the fitting with your fingertips if you're lucky enough and often make faster progress that way. It still sucks, but whatever. There's a 12mm nut on the clutch master that's super easy to remove with a swivel socket and a long extension. Yeah, I know I made a huge mess, and if you ever do that with hydraulic fluids, clean it up immediately. Soapy water is preferred. The thing's going to get paint next, and that's why I'm slacking. Along with some of this firewall clutter, I also don't need the fuel lines. I mean, I do need fuel lines, but definitely not these factory ones. My entire fuel system's changing dramatically, as most of you already know. I probably should have removed these things in the last video and saved you these 18 seconds, but then the other video would have been 18 seconds longer. You're welcome. The resistor pack goes away because I'll be going from a low impedance to a high impedance injector. That resistance will be built right into each injector on the next setup, so there's no further need for the resistor pack. The only purpose of this thing is to drop the injector input voltage from 12 volts to only 5. There are advantages for both types of injectors, but the racing advantage of affordable, high flow rate injectors favors the high impedance variety. Stock or street strip builds and everyone without engine management typically don't ever need to change any of this. I'll be removing my engine wiring harness in this video, and I haven't touched or mentioned it so far along this journey yet. There's going to be some massive changes coming to it, just the same as everything else, but everything here first needs to go away because I'm not painting it. Not just the engine harness, but the MAF translator, the Dynatech ignition amplifier wiring, none of that stuff's returning to this car. The entire engine management system and electrical system will be rewired, and we all have that to look forward to. I learned my lesson the hard way on the Hyundai with old wiring. I would much rather troubleshoot the problems that I can create for myself than the pre-existing ones that I don't know about. Rewiring that Elantra was the single best thing that ever happened to it. I won't be removing the main fuse box just yet though. It's happening, but I'm going to get this harness out of the way for now. I'm removing the battery cables and the power distribution stuff that I installed 14 years ago. That was another lesson that I learned from the Hyundai. The engine bay is a much better location for a battery. It just is. But before I start messing around with the battery relocation, I really need to fix these hatch struts because an extremely heavy hatchback slamming on me while I'm working, that would really hurt. It's 63 pounds and 33 of that is glass, 6 pounds is wiper motor, wiper arm, and wiper. This is not the last time I'll have to remove and install these things, though, due to the whole bodywork thing. And clearly I'll have to come back for some of these fasteners, but for now, at least, I'll be able to keep this hatch up off my dome. And I won't be having to work around or having to move a board around that just doesn't seem to fit anywhere securely. MR100467. Look it up if your hatch struts are bad. They're extremely affordable and easy to replace. They solve a very specific problem, and if only one goes bad, the other one won't hold it up all by itself. They should come as a set to replace both. You saw that I took the opportunity to clean up the bolt holes and mounting flanges because these are the first brand new parts bolted to this car in 12 years. And they're just hatch struts. People claim that DSMs are unreliable money pits that are difficult to work on, and I just don't get it. The rumor has to be completely false because everyone watching my videos knows for a fact that I haven't replaced a single brand new thing on mine in over a decade. This was super easy, plus the immediate satisfaction of a job well done. They lift 70 pounds again. No longer is it a two-person coordinated operation required to open up the hatchback without a key. I quit working back here in the previous video and bought these struts for safety reasons, but the real reason I left the disc changer in is because I didn't have the 12mm wrench I needed to get the last bolt loose. That shares the ground with the battery box. The disc changer is attached to the panel, and factory is cool, but the evolution of users have rendered it obsolete. I love this thing, but it's not coming back. It still works, but for how long? Another part of the stereo, and a part that's in the way of doing body work, is the factory antenna. I don't know why this premium code car with every single available option didn't have a powered antenna, but it never did. I don't know how many people still use frequencies that this antenna is designed for, but all available stereo upgrades have the antenna port for it. Mitsubishi did a near timeless job on the factory radio, not by including support for all the popular media types available in that era when they were produced, but with a simple inclusion of an auxiliary audio jack. That allowed the factory stereo to support every single kind of new confused media that sprang up in 2 decades that followed before the internet and integration took over everyone's dashboard. All of the analog broadcast frequencies modern upgrades receive won't work without it, so I prefer to keep the antenna, but I haven't fully decided how I want to deal with that hole yet. Another hole I want to address is the rear wiper arm and motor. On the other side of the interior trim, you'll find the electrical connectors and bolts for it. I always took pride in all my electrical stuff working and having everything intact, but I always kept this car so clean and rain-xed that I never used this. All it ever did was flap around at 120 miles an hour at the track. Perhaps I'll miss that about it. I'm really not very concerned at all about the 6 pounds of weight reduction. It's all about a lack of necessity. It cost me a small fortune in wiper blades from cooking on tinted glass sitting still, and I just never use it. So now if I delete it, there's a new hole that I have to deal with, but the body prep will be so much easier with it gone. I've left the interior completely out of this entire series so far because we've had so many other things to have to work on or collect just beneath it. These back seats have remnants from gaffer's tape on them now because they've belonged to a YouTuber. I bought new seats for this thing 12 years ago that have been kept inside my house ever since, just for this occasion and this comeback. All of the interior plastics are in impeccable shape because I replaced them along with all their specialty fasteners over the years just to prevent rattles and to keep everything as complete as possible. But when I broke it, I left absolutely everything that was in it exactly the way it was. All the dirt, all the change, all the receipts, all the drag strip pit passes, glove box contents, everything turned into a time capsule. I never eat at McDonald's unless I'm traveling, but here's the one combo I order because it's not messy and the drink doesn't interfere with my shifter. Saturday, October 23rd, 2010. I stopped at the Bottoms Bridge McDonald's and picked up a medium 2-cheeseburger meal for $3.10. $4.89 with the drink and tax. I paid $5 cash, got 11 cents back. Oh, the good old days, 2010. Back when not only this car, but even the search engine still worked.
A seatbelt. Non-faded license plate. I'm a slob. Powered on Mountain Dew. It's diet. Oh, it's gross.
I don't know what I was doing back then drinking the fake stuff. Maybe that's all I ever did wrong. Cletus was drinking the high-octane real stuff, and everyone saw what happened with him.
I guess I don't have any connections for the seatbelt.
I could have swore there was an electrical connection under there, but nope. The non-powered seats are easy enough to deal with whether they're leather or not, but let's get this thing out of here. The old show judges that liked stock appearing have moved on, and my standards have changed.
There goes your old throne, Alicia. Oddly, that's not coming back either.
The inside of this car will never have looked better once my new black leather Evo Recaro seats are installed. And of course, only once I sit in them. The factory amplifier is a mess that I won't miss. It was compact and powerful enough, but really this was the best the factory could ever do. And it was more than most manufacturers were even doing at the time. Time to remove my throne, I guess. This side's the side for idiots. Idiots who disconnect their power systems that move their electric seats for them. The front bolts are easy enough to remove because I'm tall, but the back two bolts get blocked by the seat rails, requiring heroic acts of acrobatics if you can't put power back and move them out of the way of the bolts. I currently can't. So we get to see whether or not this is even possible.
Oh, I gotta put power to it somehow. I'm never gonna get that out if I don't.
Following several dozen minutes of acrobatics and tribulation, it is with much jubilation and fanfare that I inform you I was successful.
Very proud of me.
On one of them, this one's at the worst possible location for my comfort. But who needs Benjamin Franklin's intervention with such tasks when they possess their own wizardry? I told you I got this.
Very proud of me.
Every superhero strength comes with a cost to their ultimate mortality.
Ow.
As the blood flow returns, our human characteristics grow ever more evident. Alright, let's get this seat out of here for real this time. This seat does have an electrical connection. It's a powered seat after all. The lack of which is what got me into that struggle to begin with. But after unplugging all that, some finagling, and a heave ho, how you doing, it does exactly what it's supposed to. Leave. Better things lay ahead for this interior. Now there's so much room for activities. The center console's got to go because I want to get the carpet out of here. A whole lot of things I'm removing extend the entire length of the car, and none of this needs to be in here for where it's going. Getting the center console and carpet out will make all of that easier. I've always appreciated how Mitsubishi made their interiors in this era so simple to take apart with just a Phillips head, a pick, your hands, and on a rare occasion perhaps a 10mm socket or needle nose pliers. They did a decent job at hiding fasteners without hiding the fasteners from the people who need to find and use them. There are some over-the-top examples of some things they did to do this, but even those were sensible. I'll show you one of them shortly, but with all the cup holder covers and all the fasteners loose, it all comes apart without having to force anything. The materials do degenerate over time, but it's always been a well-made interior in my book. I don't have to take the stereo out for the sake of the center console. You see, it's already gone, but there's other stuff inside of here that I'm after, and we don't need it. The other stuff I'm after in there is related to the engine wiring harness. The first thing to remove is going to be the ECU because it's at the end of the whole ordeal, and that's easy and accessible enough to do. But I still have to make myself a little smaller to get in here and do all of it. Aside from the ground connections that have to be unbolted from hard to reach places, there's also multiple connections that extend to the instrumentation, EFI power, rear oxygen sensor, chassis wiring, etc. And all that needs to be unplugged in order to get the engine harness out. So with the ECU out of the way, next go the shifter cables. The shift cables make unbolting the engine harness ground a little bit complicated because it's sandwiched right in between them. Taking the two bolts out that secure the cables to the firewall is simple with a swivel 12 and a long extension, but that's nowhere near the end of the efforts required to move them out of the way. You'd think it would be smart to leave them connected to the shifter and just remove it all together as one assembly. But the cables also cover up the shifter bolts to remove it, so if you pull the shift cable clips that secure them and the firewall bolts are loose, then you'll have the slack in the cables necessary to remove them as an assembly. You can get to the bolts if you do that. My shift cables are secured by E-clips to my B&M short shifter, so they were easy enough to just pop off and remove though. I can get the cables out of here. Oh heck, why not just go ahead and remove the shifter too. My interior is complete, but by no means is it perfect. Still, I'm sure that lots of DSM people remember the days when all the plastic screw covers were intact. A lot of this stuff has a tendency to break and get lost as you're doing service. It's not just in the door handles where Mitsubishi dressed up the fasteners or hid them. There's also screw head covers for all of the door panels, and you'll find these in many other places in the 2G DSM interior. For the doors, I think they're an elegant touch, but the plastic covers often get launched into oblivion during removal and lost along the way in service, so I've still got all mine. Truth be told, I bought spares back when you could still get them. You'll know in all the instances whenever there's a screw head that's supposed to have one of these things because it has a tapered lip around the outside that fits inside the cover. It appears as though there's a washer behind the little button head screw, but that's your fastener for this. If you've never seen these things and thought that was an odd screw head, that's why. Pop them all off, pop the clips off, harvest the 6 screws, and the rest of what holds the door on are just plastic clips. Work your way around the edges of the door panel and get all those things loose, then lift up and back to free the window scraper from the door. This gives you the access that you need to unplug the wiring, and now I can just set this door panel aside. Same exact thing on the other side, just a slightly bigger wiring harness to deal with. Probably one of the easier door panels to remove for as fancy as Mitsubishi made it look. But check that out, there's no foam left on the speaker cones at all. These stock Infinities have played their last note. I find it amusing that the black sticky stuff on the plastic door thing is not sticky at all anymore, and that's weird. I thought that stuff never quit being sticky. Moving on backwards, gonna take the rear plastic interior panels out, and after we get those things removed, that's where things are gonna start looking a little bit weird. First, aside from the 3 screws that you have to take loose, you've also got to remove the seat belts from it. One's got a little flip-up cover over it, and the other is clipped together with what looks like a little sealed-up clamshell thing, but you can pop it apart at the seam very easily with a pick. All the seat belt bolts are 17 millimeters. The coat hook has to go too because it's screwed through the body, and then you can pull evenly across both sides of each panel to begin separating the clips that secure it to the body. These things can be a pain, and if you're not applying even pressure across the part, you can actually break the clips off, but even when everything works properly, they can still squeak through the panel from vibration when you're driving around, and a 4G63 powered anything makes enough of this to drive you insane. So I previously took the whole rear section apart and duct taped all of the contact points where these clips stabbed through, so they'd have an insulating layer that didn't squeak. It didn't just work, it made the whole back seat quieter, but yeah, look at all that silver duct tape that I used. You might also spot some blue electrical tape on some of the other clips. Same sort of thing. I use this car a lot, and I ensured that it never made any sort of noises that it wasn't supposed to make. But you'd think that I would have at least vacuumed it. It's a far cry from its previous show finish, especially after over a decade of fallout. After the events that I built it for all dried up, I just used up this forged fun machine for over a half a decade in the wild continuously for about 50,000 miles. I have no regrets. I knew its rebirth was imminent. Using these divided plastic trays for interior screws and fasteners is, well, it's what you need. You need plenty of these things. Don't do this without them. All the fasteners blend together if you don't know why they used what size, what color for what, and put them back where they go correctly. If you don't, you can actually damage interior parts. I know this, but for those of you who don't, these boxes can save you all those hard lessons effortlessly. At the very least, it's going to help you put back together an interior that neither buzzes nor squeaks. 2Gs are gifted with a few specialty fasteners. For instance, the screw that's on the trunk popper is different from every single other screw you'll encounter. There's fancy covers and fasteners for the dead pedal, and both that and the gas pedal stoppers are examples of things that got bolted down. Plenty of functional, fun hardware to keep track of, and we don't even have the carpet out of here yet. The door sill panels are one screw, and otherwise just clips, but be sure to put the clips that get stuck in the body, pull those back out and put them back on the plastic parts from whence they came. Failing to do this is a recipe for breaking the plastic parts during reassembly. And now I can get this really dirty carpet out of here. I can't tell all of you how happy I am that you're seeing this car at its worst. It's going to make it that much better of a finished product. After you've filed and separated the parts into these containers, it's easy enough to write what everything is right on the lid, and if you plan to handle this with oily hands at any point in the future, cover it in clear packing tape when you're done. Ink will wipe right off with oil. If you don't go through this trouble to sort and categorize things, I'll give you less than 3 days to forget where it all goes. The emergency brake cables are hanging out underneath this safety restraint system thing, and that's what I'm assuming it is based on the red connectors. There's plenty of things on this car that I actually don't understand, but I understand that I won't have the clearance to remove the emergency brake cables without removing this box first. I had already taken the cable ends off of the handle, but you need more slack in the cables than that just to get them loose. Once you've done that, just remove the clamps from the cables where they bolt down inside the car, put it up in the air, or I guess crawl under it if you have to, and pop the grommets loose on the cables. With those free, just jiggle both cables right out of the holes. That takes care of most of the dangle underneath this car. One more point of dangle though, the oxygen sensor. The connector for this is actually under the driver's seat. It has a waterproof bulkhead grommet that takes a pair of needle nose pliers and some creative prying to let go. When you get it, it just plops right out. Now, back to that engine harness I was trying to remove earlier. There's a clip in the wheel well that you need to squeeze and carefully pop loose because you need it. And then there's the bulkhead grommet that has instructions right on it where you need to push so that you don't break it. Do what it say. There's the big main EFI power connection for the engine harness just below where the main fuse and relay panel live, and it needed to come loose to disconnect the other far end of the harness. And with the last of these chassis connections and solenoids loose, I can now finish removing the rest of the engine harness from inside the car. This side's all just dangling. First, there's that harness ground bolt that's really hard to get to. Got that? Now there's those connections for the instrumentation, air conditioning, and EFI power relay and cruise control connections. At least that's what I think it was. It's extremely tight in here, and the connectors require a bit of persuasion to let go. You know my take on engine harness connectors. The stiffer and more difficult they are to take loose, the better. These took a very long time to separate. I took my time using every trick available to me to avoid breaking anything. It really didn't take anything special other than patience, but once they were all disconnected, I could free the ECU side of the harness, take the passenger side kick panel loose, and start feeding the engine harness through the firewall. Now I don't have to paint my engine harness because it isn't there. It certainly is getting a lot neater and tidier up in here than it was. I've still got to pull the rest of my power distribution stuff out, and that's going to be a whole lot easier than it was to install with the whole interior gone. But before I get into all of that, I want to finish the removal of the clutch hydraulic system first. The clutch master and reservoir are only held in by a single nut right now, and you can see it there just to the bottom left. And also the relay rod on the pedal, of course. You watched me disconnect the stuff on the other side of the firewall earlier. This just lets me finally check off the box. Remove the nut, unlock the relay rod, back the rod out, and that's the first half of it. The second half of it is the hydraulic lines. They're bolted to the firewall and also bolted to a bracket on the frame rail. I didn't bother removing every single little thing. I just took the whole thing off as an assembly, and we'll deal with that one later. The gigantic, thick, heavy copper main power and alternator wires I ran came out without putting up too much of a fight. They really didn't age well at all. The copper strands turned white, and so did all the red shielding. The circuit breakers I installed were cool because it was easy enough to turn the car's power off and maintain my battery, or disable it so that it couldn't be stolen. I don't know if that ever worked for that, but I do still have the car. I'm really getting through this interior, man. Just a few more pieces and components to go, and I'll have this thing bare enough for the next stages. I'm going to remove the dashboard so that airbag's got to go first. In order to get the airbag out, you go in through the glove box. The 2G's glove box has two hinges nutted down, and once those are free, wiggle the stoppers out, and then there's an electrical ground switch connection on the bottom for the glove box light. And now 2 bolts and 2 screws secure the airbag into the dashboard. I did not see this coming, and I did not do this to these bolts. Either someone's playing a funny trick on me, or someone at the factory had a penchant for sending owners and mechanics a playful message. I cannot confirm this marking is that, but, whoever time capsuled this one just got their 15 seconds of fame. That's wild, man. The airbag comes out without any discernible fuss, but there's a red locking safety connector that you need to disconnect after you get it free. Go for the green lever on it first if it's not already obvious to you. And now to remove the rest of the knee panel on the driver's side. This one's laden with fancy trim covers, hood popper cables, bolts, and hopefully you didn't drill holes into it and screw stuff into it like the person who owned mine before me at some point did. But this one was still in better shape than the one that was on my old GS, so I kept it. Once in a while I do a thing that I think makes sense at the time, and Matt just says something to me like, Why didn't you just take the key out of the lock on the wheel? And just like that, someone half my age makes me feel really dumb. Totally could have done that. I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of the interior so that I can see all the metal stuff. I want to look on, in, and behind everything so I can address every little thing that might concern me later on with this car. I also don't want anything that could catch on fire or be ruined by paint overspray left in the vehicle for the body stages of this project. Just about everything that can be updated will be updated. Time and age have ensured that hygiene is a priority for everything that I'm going to keep. That's why you see the seat belts, the stereo equipment, the wiring, all the interior trim, all leaving this car. It's hard to look at deconstruction as progress, but none of the other work can take place with it all bolted together. And that's what we're getting close to, and the growing piles of it that accrue as you peel this onion make it clearly evident just how much equipment Mitsubishi packed into this chassis. I have a pretty good example of what ultraviolet light can do to materials. Fortunately, nothing in the car is made from this stuff, but what this is right here are the remains of the camera strap from the very first camera I ever used to make a YouTube video with. It's like 400 videos ago. And it was the camera that I was still using on this car's drive of shame as I limped it home with a spun rod bearing. Anyway, I removed the strap that night to tape the camera down and capture what turned into my drive of shame, and this strap sat in the back seat for the entire duration of time since this car was broken. I never used that camera again because I started shooting 1080 HD the minute after I blew this thing up, but look at what the sun did to this. Over time, ultraviolet light eats fabric, and in 10 years' time the sun ate this, but the car's almost 30 now. The materials they made these interiors out of might be orders of magnitude more durable than this camera strap, but none of them are invincible. In fact, I'm really surprised the stuff Mitsubishi used on their interiors during this era actually held up as well as it has. Just ask Mr. Frog about what he thinks about the sun and ultraviolet light. What do you mean frogs don't talk? This one's telling us a story right now. Ain't nobody got time for that. Because now that interior is out, I can remove all this funky stuff from here so that I can feel better about rolling around on the floor and removing everything else. There. That's better. All the things that you saw hanging off the firewall still have friends and family bolted all over the interior side here. That's one of the main things we're after in this video. The throttle cable just pops off the pedal with a pick and it fits through a groove. It comes apart easily enough, and there's only a couple of bolts on the firewall that secure it. Even though the steering wheel has to be reinstalled to move this car body to the shop, you know, because we need to be able to steer it, I have to remove it and everything else around it because it's in the way at the moment. Of course, I use a little 1/4-inch wrench here to punish myself instead of using power tools because I forgot to climb in here with the air hose. The 12mm wrench was already here, but truthfully, I'm doing all this right now with 2 broken toes, and it hurts a whole lot worse to climb out and back in with the air hose just to... yeah, the hand tools are already here. And after all that, I didn't even have the 14mm socket for the bolts that hold the steering column to the dash support beam, so I had to climb back out and get it anyway. 10 bolts secure it. There's a half dozen electrical connections on the column for the ignition, turn signals, headlights, wiper controls, cruise control, airbags. You saw me disconnect that red connector for the airbags right when I started. This is a busy part electrically because it's the focal point of driver input, and my silly stretch wrap idea wound up just making it harder to unplug half of them. But it's stretch wrap, so it's stretched right out of my way like it's supposed to. You know, it's designed to do that. Like I said, this thing will be coming back, but everything else has to go first. And there you have it. There's the miles on this thing that match up with all the rest of the decay you've seen. This car was loved. This car was driven. Much like myself, this car is in far better shape for its age and what it's been through, and that number will be nearly meaningless by the time I'm finished. The bezel and gauge cluster get to make their exit for now. In the previous video, I alluded to how this dashboard was from my old GS, but the gauge cluster is of course the original GSX unit. I swapped dashboards because of all the screw holes from either fuel system modifications or from a bag phone. I don't know if you even know what those are. I think it was a bag phone because I did find remnants of its antenna wire in here. I mentioned that the GS dashboard had been permeated with ethylene glycol from a heater core failure. Add sunlight to that dry rotting agent and this dashboard is completely toast today. I do not have a replacement for this, but I'll get it. The first time I painted this car, the spoiler studs and nuts seized into the tailgate, and even in 2004 the replacement fasteners or even a stock spoiler were unobtainium. I like the low-rise spoiler that I have, you know. The nuts seized, but I was able to turn the whole fastener and back them out of the spoiler on the other side. It's a 3-piece spoiler, and aside from the center section of it, there's 14 more fasteners to take loose. 2 of them are plastic clips, but all the rest are screws. 4 screws and 1 plastic clip free each side section from their mounts, and that reveals the other 8 screws that secure the mounts to the body. 1 screw on one side wanted to fight. Stripped. I tried a few of my tricks to remove it with little success before getting a tiny little cutoff wheel on my Dremel and attempting to make a flathead slot. Even the tiny cutoff wheel was too big, and drilling it out with my completely dull drill bits was never going to work either, so off camera I just ground the living daylights out of the old stainless hatch strut rods with this Dremel thing to wear it down to a smaller size first, so I didn't have to cut too deeply into the part. The screw head's recessed, but ultimately this worked. I got it turning. The teeny tiny little nicks left in it could be filled if I care to do it, but they're in a plastic part that won't rust, and they're invisible from when the hatch is closed, so yeah, I'll probably fix it. But there you go. Spoiler stud stuck right there. If anything gets done with these, I'll take it up with the body guy. My silicone treatment stopped the rust I found in 2004 and the water leak that caused it all, but I'm leaving all the stuff I siliconed in it for the body guy. Aside from this type of thing, I want absolutely everything else out of the way of the body guy. Things that were once highly effective solutions are now dated and silly, no longer necessary. You bet the paint is carrying into the engine bay, yes sir. So you know what that means. That means that all the brake lines and the ABS pump have to go too. There's 16 fittings total on the brake system. 6 are already loose because of the other components that I removed for the calipers and the master. But I'm continuing my brake line removal efforts at the pump because there's 6 more fittings in one now easy to access place. This is so much easier without all the other stuff packed around it. Flare wrenches and vice grips are your friend. Put one eye on the fitting and one eye on the wrench. If you ever feel the flare wrench starting to strip the fastener, it's moving and the fastener's not, just quit before it strips and immediately grab your vice grips instead. The second it starts to round it off, your flare wrench has already lost that fight. That's it tapping out. Stop. Vice grips. That will give you a fitting that you can still put a wrench on once you're putting it back together. Yes, I do want ABS. This is my preference. I'm not deleting this. It's safety equipment. This is not a race car. This is a street car that just so happens to race sometimes. It's complicated, it's bulky, and it's heavy, but I'll work around it. It helps any driver protect the investment and time that I'm putting into this car right now. So it's staying. I'm leaving all the lines assembled so that their orientation is preserved. On the brake proportioning valve, I only took 2 of the lines loose. It's pretty easy to understand how it goes back together properly, but I'll most certainly be doing something to these to put my own spin on them. Don't be shocked if I make my own out of stainless steel. It's one of the options I'm considering. But they're bolted down from end to end on the body with a dozen bolts in 2 different sizes. It's simplistic enough that so long as you have all the bolts together in one place, you wouldn't really need to document anything to figure out how it all goes back together. The shapes of the lines tell you where the lines go and where the tabs line up. The size of the hole in the body will tell you which bolt to use. The ABS pump is secured by 6 bolts. It has 2 electrical connections on it, and there's some plastic harness clips that are really hard to get an angle on to squeeze from the backside so that you don't break the little plastic tabs off. I like reusing these fasteners. Embrace this challenge if you like putting things back together like you were never in there. There are replacement plastic fastener cable tie things available to fix the ones that you break, but they're not the original variety and nothing's going to fit and work better if you're reusing your parts. You've watched me do this carefully on parts that I later destroyed, and I still don't regret it, because practice makes perfect. I've been working off another whiteboard checklist like you know I always do. I started on this earlier, but I didn't finish the job. I thought this was a good mod back when I did it, and it's still sturdy, solid work, but now I regret it. While it solved everything I was trying to address back when I did it, I'd get to be in charge of where this stuff resurfaces again, and I don't want the battery in my interior. It's me who changed. The fuel filler neck is one of the parts that I need to remove, not just for the body guy, but because the tubular rear subframe that's going in it. I have to modify it. I'll cover more of that once we get there. I'm just trying to check off all the boxes today. I thought this list was what it was going to take to make a video, but now that I've made it through all of this, I can tell that there's more I could still do. Looks like I've done everything related to this car, but, you know, we've got a list troll adding other things. Make car go fast. That was either Matt or the mice. Either way, I chuckled. The tie rods are ordered, just not here yet, like many other parts that I didn't write on here. Taking a car this far down exposes all the other things that you'll have to spend money on, and I think this is why most people don't bother to do this kind of work. They don't want to know what they should replace, and if they don't know, they think it's fine. That's just another kind of example of the just turn the stereo up variety of audio maintenance, and my goal is to fix everything that those people don't want to know about. A 0-mile reset at 160,000 miles.
My car's starting to look more and more like Chad's every day. Oh wait, he's drinking the high octane stuff. No diet here.
Even though the list is done, this is the I can do more part that I was talking about. This wasn't on the list, but it clearly needs to happen. The brake booster and firewall insulation are in the way of completing the bodywork, and setting the brake booster free also releases the firewall insulation. 4 bolts and a pedal pin later, they both get to experience their freedom for the first time since the factory put them there. The insulation just doesn't know it yet. The front wiper motor and relay rod assembly are another example of doing more. I'm rather proud of myself for doing all this work with the hood still on, and I'm leaving it on. You get to see that this can happen. There's 6 bolts that hold this whole assembly into the gutter, and don't let this awkward shape fool you. After you get all 6 of those bolts out and fish the wiper motor harness through the firewall, which is just secured with a big rubber grommet, you can fish this whole assembly out of here in one big piece. The trick is to free one side as far as you possibly can, and then come back to the center, squeeze the bars together, and they're flexible enough to pop it right out, even with the hood still attached. As rusty as those relay rods looked, you would have never guessed the rain gutter would be this rust-free. I'm telling you, this one's a cherry. Though it took me 2 videos to strip down this firewall, it's because there's inside things and outside things that have to be done to accomplish all of this. Both are a ton of work, lots of stuff to document and keep track of. And there you have it. There's the condition of the firewall. Rust-free, the original ultra-thin factory engine bay paint job, and no rust. None. No damage, nothing to fix. Someone's going to ask me if I'm shaving all the bolt holes and filling them. For the most part, no, but probably with some of them, and definitely with all the ones that I created myself. Some of the damage on the body I'll be able to fix myself, and I plan to in the next video. This damage was caused by a lift, not by being high-centered, and it's one big crush event that I believe I'll be able to easily pull out with the right tools. It's not just the bottom of the floor pan brace. When that got crushed, it pushed the driver's side floor pan upwards, which I don't appreciate. No sir, I don't like it. It's not just on one side, it's on both, but the driver's side is worse. Once these rails get pulled back out, I'm pretty sure the floorboard will be easy to coerce back into shape if it isn't already. Perhaps you saw the stud welder item on my whiteboard. Yeah, I already have that. That's going to be my secret weapon there, and it's something that I'm confident I can do myself. If that sounds interesting and you're not subscribed, well, go do the thing because it's going to be really fun.
All the powder-coated parts have returned. I wish I could show it all to you, but we've got quite a mess built up in front of it, and
Alright, fine, you win. I don't want any of you to feel trolled.
Wait, get my hand on backwards. That's better.
Detective Coding turned these parts around so fast, and I can't say enough good things about them. I'm every bit as anxious as you are to see these things reassembled and doing their duty on my GSX again, but even I have to wait. This is a struggle for me, too. I want to open and fondle all of them right now. This is beautiful. And though that's weird because it's a car part, it's still accurate. But I have to make a huge mess first before I can reassemble all of this. I've had to practice saving brand new parts for their on-camera unboxings for years. Don't do that. It takes some of the joy out of life. But that's just how much I care about you being there with me when it all happens. After all, it's only your support on Patreon and YouTube that keep this channel alive. I just enjoy doing the work and sharing it with all of you.
I need to really get some shelves and do something about this. You don't need to see that in a video, but solved that one. I'm going to get that to happen because this and the other room full of parts in here is a complete disaster. You know, that's not even half of it. But I've got all of this stuff that I pulled off in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching a 2G GSX get completely stripped down to the bare body. Okay, fine, maybe not all the way down to the body. I've got a harness and just a random couple of things here and there and some more fasteners to sort out. But I'm going to take care of all that stuff without having to narrate and explain it all to you. You know how sorting things works.
You don't want to watch me sort these.
It's boring. I've got a fairly crazy selection of parts that are on their way. Some of it's here, some of it's not. I'll just save that for the next episode where we're actually going to need it, because we'll be playing with the parts that those things go to. I just thought I'd catch you up on how much stuff has to be done to a car before you hand it off to a body guy. And he'll know how to deal with stuff like this. I've got those siliconed in. But I'm going to clean up some bolt holes, get some more of this cleaned up, and we'll find out what happens in the next episode. Until then, stay tuned.